Well, good morning, and thank you for being here. I'm joined today by Scott Maxwell, the Executive Director of Wounded Warriors Canada. Today's announcement is an important one for Canadian men and women in military uniform, and I'm pleased to have Scott's support. The members of our Canadian Armed Forces make a commitment to our country that is virtually unparalleled. When they join up, they know that there's a very good chance that they may be asked to fight on behalf of their country and to put their lives in danger. They do so willingly and unreservedly. However, when they are ready to leave the forces, or have to leave because a medical condition means they can no longer fulfill a job in the military, they often don't have the easiest time finding new employment. I believe it's important for us to support these veterans as they move out of military service. And I believe the Government of Ontario, and the private sector for that matter, has a role to play in assisting these veterans in whatever small way we can. The private members bill I'm tabling will allow a member of the Canadian Forces who has at least 3 years of service, or who previously served for at least 3 years but has not been out of the forces for more than 5, to be able to apply for internally posted government positions, and gives qualified veterans preference over other candidates in external hiring processes for jobs within the Ontario government. Many of us think of veterans as older men and women. We see them as those who fought in the world wars and are now retired or deceased. But the reality is there are a large number of veterans who are in the prime years of their working lives and looking for their next job or career. The average age of Canadian Armed Forces regular and reserve force personnel at release is 37. These men and women are young. They are admired for their leadership and teamwork, and have executed their duties faithfully and effectively to serve their nation at home and abroad. They have skills, training, and experience, and we should be helping them to utilize these attributes. On average, there are 7,600 Canadian Armed Forces regular and reserve force personnel who leave the military each year. That is a huge resource of talent the Ontario government should be tapping into, and they are strong candidates for provincial public service jobs. It's important that we do what we can to assist them, and that's why I'm tabling this bill today. I should note that the idea of giving veterans hiring preference is not a new one. The federal government provided it to vets from the First and Second World Wars, as well as the Korean War. Additionally, both the Government of Canada and the province of New Brunswick have recently passed legislation that provides for priority hiring of veterans in their public services. I hope that my colleagues in this legislature will see fit to pass this bill quickly, and I also hope that it might give a positive push to the private sector to also give our veterans a higher priority when they're hiring new staff. As we're about to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe, it is a fitting time to consider how we can all help the veterans of today. Thank you, and just ask Scott if he wants to say that.
Happy to be here, and any day we're talking about enhanced support for our veterans, in this case in Ontario, it's a good thing, and something that we should be focused on, frankly, more in this country. We're at Wounded Warriors Canada. We're deeply aware of the challenges facing our ill and injured Canadian Armed Forces members, certainly upon being medically released. As Jim mentioned, the age, many are up to between 25 to 35 years old, who plan on working for the next 30 years of their life, and who maybe at one point had a thought of being in the Canadian Forces for the duration of their career, and that's changed. So it's one of the gaps that exist in transition to civilian life, and that the term is skills transition, and the ability to apply their highly transferable skills is too often a challenge, and the ability to have a long career, a great career in the Ontario Public Service would be great, and it's something that obviously this bill seeks to address. So, happy to take any questions about.
Don't the veterans beneficiate usually at 37 of a very generous pension usually?
Well, it depends. I mean, it really depends on. Well, there's been a change. The new Veterans Charter changed. It was implemented in 2006, made a shift from a pension-style benefit system to a lump sum payment. So there's changes in the compensation for veterans, and that's and as well. But the point is that they want to work. they're trained, highly trained and highly skilled to work. And it's not just this is but one step as I see it with the Ontario Public Service support and aspect. We also have to encourage our private sector employer partners, which we've been doing on an ongoing basis over the course of the last few years, to allow them to help adopt a hire a veteran strategy and campaign, because it's equally important that we're having this conversation in the private sector as we are today for the public sector.
Scott, what kind of inroads have been made? I see here since 2005, federal deputy heads and hiring managers have had the option of giving members of the forces access to internal job competitions. What kind of results have you seen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've in learning of this particular private member's bill, I contacted the Ombudsman's office at Veterans Affairs to see how successful it's been, and the answer I got back to date was wait out. We're compiling data and evidence to see how effective it's been. So I haven't been able to receive any numbers in terms of the veterans that have actually been hired in the federal public service.
Jim, do you know how many?
No, I mean, there is in one of our briefing notes a vague percentage, but again, the federal government just on March 31st passed the new law. So I don't think it was as effective as it could have been when it was just on a voluntary basis for managers to, if they wanted to give preference to a veteran. So obviously it wasn't working well enough, and hence the new law that will come into effect soon. The regulations are being written, but it did pass the final hurdle in the Senate on March 31st. Well, there's 60,000 Ontario government employees, the ones we're talking about, and I think the attrition rate is as high as 5%. And that's just the normal attrition. So.
But don't you think that if the people that are released from the military do have a pension and they receive a different treatment than others that don't have it when they want to be hired, that it would be unfair to the rest of the population?
Well, I mean, that's really not considered when you're hiring someone. You're looking at their skills, their qualifications. And this is no free ride for veterans. They have to be qualified. And that's why there's also the 5-year period there after they leave the service, leave the forces, to get qualified if they're looking for a particular career path that might be in the public service. You know, there's a number of people sitting in the legislature today who are teachers who have full pensions. Should they not be allowed to work in the Ontario government?
No, but should they have a privilege, though? Should they be helped more than others to find?
Well,
a job?
I think you know, this is definitely asking society to make an exception for those that have voluntarily served. They've been in many cases sent away, so they haven't been able to build up years of service in a particular organization. So therefore, their resumes often have a gap that says, "I went to Afghanistan." And you know, we that have never served or seen war firsthand don't know what that's like at all. But we do know they are highly skilled people, as Scott says. Maybe you'd
just some of the best trained in the country in terms of their talent and their transferable skills to civilian careers. And it's exciting for our organization at Wounded Warriors Canada, because we know that part of helping transition to civilian life and those that have been medically released and diagnosed, let's say, with an operational stress injury like post-traumatic stress disorder or something like that, is one of the big gaps that can actually further challenge the transition is not having a job at all.
So just wanted to ask, do you think there's I don't want to say discrimination against veterans, but a bias against veterans because we haven't been to war in the extent that we were World War I, World War II, for example, when, you know, my grandfather and then my father came back, and their whole generations had to be taken back into the workforce because there really wasn't most people were veterans, whereas now veterans are, there's lots of them, but there's still relatively a small minority
Amongst
in
the
comparison
population.
to the workforce. Yeah, and there's, people do hear about PTSD and the culture seems to be different now than in the post-war period. So is that making it harder for veterans?
Sure, and we're growing, and the awareness and understanding of what of our the new era of veteran, their age, their experience, the different conflicts, it's improving. It's slow, but it's improving. We've seen that. We've seen even the Canadian Armed Forces and how they're working to address issues like post-traumatic stress and mental health within the Canadian Forces. So we're all kind of doing this together, and these kinds of bills and parts of this legislation, it helps raise awareness. It's not just the bill itself. The fact that we're talking about hiring a veteran, whether, how that manifests itself down the road through the Ontario Public Service or in the federal public service is one thing. But it's also critically important that we're talking about the transferable skills that these men and women have to apply and it's part of a civilian career, hopefully a long-standing and successful civilian career.
Yeah, so I have CFB Borden, one of the largest training bases in Canada, in my riding, and there is a bit of a stigma out there. I mean, particularly some of those that are medically discharged. Scott can talk about, whether you ever really recover from PTSD, SD. But we have thousands of examples where they do.
Nice.
You'll always have it, but you're completely functional and have tremendous skills that you can offer the public service. And from the both serving men and women at CFB Borden and a number of, I'm surprised how many young veterans I have in my riding, because they would have gone through Borden at one time for training. They liked living in the area, and after their service they've come back. They would like the hand up, not a handout. But an opportunity, and I think a big part of this, if the Wynne government were to take this on, is it's the education and awareness. So they're going to have to educate not only public service managers and management, but in doing so, they'll be educating private sector employers too about the worthwhileness of hiring a member of our Canadian Armed Forces or a former member.
So, Jim, is there no government support for your bill yet, or?
Well, I'm just introducing it today. I would think Ms. Wynne would be very smart to steal my bill. I welcome her to do that. I think it's a win-win. I would hope that our public service unions will also see this as a win-win. Certainly federally, they had some reservations, the unions at first, but then when they realized they were going to get new great union members, things settle down, and we'll see how it goes, because it's fairly new in Ottawa. So.
On another topic, just a letter you